Ladies and gentlemen, if you've got your final drinks and you can be seated, that would be appreciated. Thank you, Anna, for the encouragement there. Yeah, I was just going to sit next to the hat. Thank you all for coming. We're obviously here for another edition of The Leading Edge. I'm obviously not Julian Malnick, but if you were here at the lunch last month, you might have heard Julian introduce me at the end that I'll be doing the next couple of hosting the next couple of events. So obviously starting today. If you're not aware, a few people are. My background has been either working in mining or investing in mining for my lifetime. Started down the road at Goldfields House with RGC, although I was sent to Tasmania for 3 winters. Switched across to Pasminco, worked in funds management for 20 years. I know some of the gentlemen through my investing as a fund manager that are presenting tonight. So that's my background. Julian sends his apologies. I understand he said he'd be out bush somewhere in far north Queensland, or maybe it's Menzies in WA, out of mobile contact. And I guess one thing Julian said to me, he said, you've got to have a theme, a focus, talk about something that's here and now. And obviously the royalty changes that we saw in New South Wales with the coal royalties is obviously on a few of our members' minds. And I know that we've got a couple of Robertsons in the room, and they know far more about coal than I do. But I saw on LinkedIn today, and I've replied with a comment. There was one of the New South Wales ministers said, coal royalties haven't gone up in 14 years, which is slightly worrying because, of course, they're percentage rates. And if the coal price has gone up 7 times in the last 20 years, and the tonnage has gone up, the amount of royalties they've gone has gone up more than 10 times. But far be it for me to point out to a Minister of the Crown that her mathematics wasn't quite right. But if you do want to see that, my comments are on LinkedIn. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming here tonight. Thank you for accepting the small cover charge that we had. We were finding that there was a certain element who were enthusiastically signing up the first day that was possible and then not showing up. And obviously the advantage tonight is we've managed to have a longer drinks period, so you're all suitably lubricated for 3 very good speakers. Hopefully not too much, Linda, otherwise we're going to have to to go back to a shorter period. So anyway, so thank you to the sponsors that have helped us out this year. We've got the two sponsors here, Bear Del Bear and an AME group. We've got a few over here on the right, Fender, Geophysics, AMEC, a couple of brokers in RFC Ambrian and Veritas, the very knowledgeable CRU group, and obviously Finola, or as my spell check says, Fiona, Princess Fiona, from RAS, down here in the front, who sends out and writes up both beforehand and to promote and a summary of what the speakers have said afterwards. So thank you, Fiona. On the other side, we've got our other sponsors, CRE, TEAS, the fabulous Tour Funds. Still haven't got those rugby tickets, Nick. APN Graphics, Ione Resources, who've got a fabulous project in the US working its way through permitting, and New South Wales Mining. So thank you all for being here. Our first speaker tonight is Andy Stewart, who is the geological guru and of Xanadu Mines and their former MD and CEO. I understand that Andy will be touching on a bit of the history of Xanadu tonight. So the presentations is getting its first outing before it heads off overseas for the autumn roadshow in the US and Canada. The board's been meeting all day, strategising on their future. So I'd like to thank all the board for coming and attending tonight. Colin Moorhead has sent his apologies. Fortunately, there's important business happening tonight that he couldn't drag himself away from the MCG for. And Andy's got a deep Mongolian background. He's worked for Vale in Mongolia. He's worked for Ivanhoe in Mongolia. He's worked with Robert Friedland. And as we're aware, Ivanhoe Mines was the discoverer of the Oyu Tolgoi deposit. And that was found when Andy was working there. And the second best project at that time was the one that Xanadu's got. Now, when the very rich Hugo Dummett part of Oyu Tolgoi was found, they dropped everything and just put all their resources into it, which has led to Andy being able to pick it up many years later and vend it into Xanadu. And since then, Zijing Mining Group has farmed in, and they are now fully funded to do a complete infill drilling required to get through the various stages of resource definition and leading to reserves. And those who have followed it hope that they drill further deeper. I understand there are 2 or 3 holes in process, and that they will find their own Hugo Dummett. Hopefully we've got another Oyu Tolgoi coming, but to explain that all, Andy Stewart.
Thank you, Graham, and thank you to the Sydney Mining Club for the opportunity to speak here tonight. Xanadu, I tried to think back at the last time Xanadu spoke at the Sydney Mining Club, and I think it was 2017. But at that time, I sort of said it's the time now to have your discoveries, because we know there's a wave of demand coming for copper. And copper's quite unique. It takes a little bit of time to find, takes a lot of time to drill, takes a lot of metres, and takes even longer to build these projects. So really today what I'm talking about is now the time. You need projects that are in development, because You know, some say the next 25 years we need to consume more copper than what we've ever mined ever. Now, all that copper is coming from very old, very deep mines in Chile, Argentina, Peru. So if our reliance on the transition to a carbon-free future is relying on the copper, we need to find more of it, and we need to put more of it in development. So Xanadu, it's very much a Sydney born-bred company that spent its whole lifetime working in Mongolia. So what I'm going to talk about today is a story, a little bit of persistence, a little bit of luck, and you need that in exploration. But now a project that's positioned to probably one of the near-term developments in terms of large copper projects globally. So it's an exciting project. So hopefully as I step through this, you'll see by the end of it, you know, what a copper project looks like and what it takes to get one of these projects going. So that's a photo there last month of our copper project. A few nights ago when I was putting these slides together, I was looking, and that camp used to be 1 or 2 gers, and that's what Mongolians live in, yurts. Now it's a full development story. So it's a very exciting project to be involved in. So disclaimer comments. So what is Xanadu? We're about creating value through exploration. What we do is we go to places where we can have tier 1 discoveries. We get on the ground, we secure tenure, and we use our geologists to find those projects. So we generate them, we take them through the generation, we drill them, and we take them through to project definition. And that's what we're doing now with the Hamugtai project. So it's about the discovery process. So the value for shareholders for us is the front end of the Lawson curve, which I'm sure you're all aware of. And then when we get it to a stage, it's about a joint venture or about finding a partner to help build these projects. For many years, raising money in Sydney, raising money in Australia, everyone always said to me, when you find this project, you can't build it. That's never the aim. The aim is to find these discoveries because the majors know you want them. These are the projects that all your majors want. So it's about having that discovery and being able to get a deal across the line that then adds value to your shareholders. When I look at our industry, the exploration industry is about a 35% internal rate of return business. If you can manage your exploration and you can have discoveries, you take that 35% rate of return. Once you get a project to a mining stage, which is an 8% rate of return, you recycle that business and you start again. And that's how you add value in this business. It's very simple. So there's no sort of, nothing technical here. It's about having genuine discoveries that people want to buy and majors need. So as I said, we're located in the South Gobi region. Our Hamugtai project you see there, our Red Mountain project. Hamugtai is very much the first end of our sort of strategies. We've had a big discovery there and we'll walk through that. Now that's a project funded through to final investment decision. We're very keen, as I said, we're an exploration company. We build a portfolio of projects, so we maintain that portfolio and that cycle going through. So we continue to expand that project pipeline. And you see in the South Gobi there, so Hamugtai, a little bit north of Oyu Tolgoi. This is an area that has developed rapidly in the last 20 years. So I think when you look at this project going from exploration, connecting power and doing these things, we're doing it rapidly, and this is why it's an interesting story. So here's a small company about a year ago struggling away, and you know, with the right project, limited funding, we were able to bring in one of the world's largest mining companies in Xanadu Mining. For those of you who are not aware, Xanadu Mining is China's biggest gold producer. As a byproduct, they produce more copper than most copper companies. They're in joint venture with Robert Friedland in the Congo, probably the world's biggest tier 1 development in the Kamoa deposit. And this is a company that's growing rapidly. So we were able to do a deal with them. And then over the last 6 to 8 months, we've seen a nice re-rating in the share price getting back to a level where we should be. But what that's done is not only put money into the top co of Xanadu, but it's given us $35 million to fund a PFS. We're managing that project, we're driving it forward, and we control all the decision making. And what it's about is getting to a decision, a final investment decision in September next year. So you can see when you look at this re-rate, it's a little bit about funding. You have a big project, but it's the ability to take it through the next stages and show the true value of it. We've had some fantastic shareholders. 62%, our registers managed by or controlled by the top 20 shareholders. We have a strong Sydney, Melbourne institutional register. And the board and management have about 9.2% of that. So when you think about Xanadu, it's all about strategy. Here's a small company, big discovery. We're driving that through the PFS. That's really our Horizon 1 discovery process. So we're ticking that box. We know we can add value to this project through exploration. And at the moment, we're ticking away with 5 or 6 drill rigs on site, drilling deep holes, drilling shallow holes, doing resource infill. So we know there will be more discoveries. The one thing that you can count on when you're in a copper district is more discoveries. These things occur in camps, and there's multiple discoveries to had. The race is now on for Xanadu to have those discoveries before we get to September next year, when there's a decision, final investment decision. Because every one of those discoveries has value. We're also positioning the company for the future. So, as I said, part of our business, have discoveries, move them through to PFS, and then get an investment through for a major company and move on. So in the background, we have an Horizon 3 strategy. It's about finding other projects. And in Western Mongolia, we're looking for nickel, we're looking for high-grade copper, and we're looking for other majorities. And we're leaning on our vast experience in Mongolia to find those assets. Very much a first mover in a way. We don't see any opposition, so it's a nice place to be competing for these types of assets. A little bit about Mongolia. Why we're in Mongolia is because we're looking for projects that all your major companies want to buy. And when you talk about copper, your BHPs, your Rio Tintos, all want porphyry copper deposits. So you've got to go where you have a chance of finding them. So we came to the South Gobi on the back of the Oyu Tolgoi discovery, and that allowed a small exploration company to explore on the ground. This is an area that gets cold in winter, but in summer you can operate a field program, a few land cruisers and swags. No fences, no people. It's really God's gift to explorers. So that gave us the opportunity to get on and run a very cheap exploration program. The scale of deposits, we're looking for big ones. We're on the doorstep of the world's biggest consumer of copper in China. That was very important to us. And we're into a country where has a culture of mining. At the moment, 21% of the GDP of the country comes from mining, and over 85% of the exports is mining. So this is a country that needs mining. And people often say to me, what's the risk of mining in Mongolia? It's like, well, when I come to Australia, I think the risk of it is closer to the people that don't need mining. Mongolia needs it. So this is a country that requires mining, and it won't stop. And despite what people think, this has been a stable democracy for 30 years. It's sandwiched between Russia and China, but it's a very stable democracy. So, this was a perfect place to explore. We're very strong on the ground in our sustainability. And this is, everyone talks about their social licence to operate now. But if you don't have this, then you've got an issue. Wherever you are in mining, whether you're in New South Wales, whether you're in Saudi Arabia, whether you're in the Philippines, whether you're in Mongolia, this has to be done properly. And any serious junior explorer will be doing this properly. So I think last year we put out our first sustainability report. I'm very proud of that. We have the community we live in, we're part of that. And it's very much a part of who we are and who we work in. A little bit about the project, Mugtai. It's a large resource. We've been able to put together over 1.1 billion tonnes of mineralisation, over 3 million tonnes of copper, 8 million ounces of gold. Importantly, this has a high-grade core. We have about 100 million tonnes over 0.8% copper equivalent. Very important in these projects. When you look at copper projects, the ones with the high-grade components, the ones with gold, are the ones that work. These are the projects your gold companies want. These are the companies your copper companies want. To have a project with scale and good byproduct credits is very important. It's a quality project. We've completed a PE study on it. We've got an NPV, a little over 600 million, 4-year payback, IRR at 20%. 30-year mine life. It's a big project, it's a great project, and a fantastic project for Mongolia. And we look at those numbers now and some of the drilling and what I'll step through now. We're hoping those numbers will improve, and it's going to be exciting. But the PFS is funded. So we're doing that. There's no dilution to our shareholders. We don't need to raise money. We're focused on that PFS, and Zijin are paying for that. We're managing it. We've been put together a world-class team, and it'll be a very good study. So a little bit where we are. I won't spend too much time on this, but where we sit here in 2023 today, the aim is to complete this PFS by September next year. We'll enter early works at a final investment decision, and then construction 2026. What we're looking for is sulphide production in 27. So, we're running hard. We're busy on the ground. Very proud that we have a national team running this. We have good oversight from some of the world's best scientists, some of the world's best engineers, and it's truly a remarkable program that's happening at the moment. So a little bit about the drilling. Since about March, April this year, we've completed 153 infill holes, 48,000 metres of drilling. We've seen some incredibly positive results at our major deposits, Stockwork Hill, White Hill, Copper Hill. For a feel for scale, you see the white lines there around the resources. That's an open pit that'll be 2 kilometres by 2.5 kilometres. So this is a big project and remains open in all directions and at depth. And based on that drilling, we'll be putting out an updated mineral resource that'll be out in October this year. So our team's working busily on that. A little bit about that resource drilling. We're very focused on, increasing the high grade. Whenever you have these large copper deposits, if you can get more of that high grade into the earlier parts of the mining, it brings back that payback period rapidly, and really affects the economics. I put here a section on Stockwork Hill, and this is part of some of the infill drilling we're doing. If you look in the background at the purple, the red, the yellow, the green, that's the resource block model in the background. But I'll draw your attention to those same colours on the drill holes. And if we look at those drill holes, we see broad zones, 29 metres of 1%. In our old resource, that was nothing. So now suddenly you've got a block of 1% copper there within 100 metres of surface. Likewise at depth, it's extending. And so we're continuing to see these high-grade zones improve this resource. And a lot of people say to me, you're dealing with a big copper deposit here. How could you miss it? But, these high-grade zones in these systems can be just like a gold system in Western Australia. They can be, a few hundred metres wide and long, and they could be hiding in there. And we've found a lot of these little gems in this resource drilling. So we're very excited about this resource that'll come out in October this year. Overall, we've seen exceptional drilling. We've seen results better than, if not equal then, to the resource. Then if we step over to our other large deposit, White Hill, we've found a new high-grade part to it. This is very significant because White Hill is very much the engine room of this system, very large, low-grade system. But in the past, it's lacked grade. Sure, it works when you can mine other parts of the system high grade. This is a big bulk system, it works. But now drilling's found a deep, high-grade part of this. And I think if any takeaway from this is if you look at that pit shape there, that's based on the optimisation of the previous resource. Now we have a huge blob sitting just outside it at the bottom of it, with some fantastic grades. And this should work. This is the way it should be, because all our other deposits, they all have high-grade cores. Now we have a high-grade core to our biggest system. So very exciting. First time we've observed broad intervals of 1% copper, high-grade gold. It's all coming together very smoothly. So we had just completed that drilling. We've had 5 rigs running on that since April. Now those 5 rigs have gone on to shallow exploration and deep exploration in the district. And if you look at the Stockwork Hill, you look at the White Hill, you look at the Copper Hill, so only about 10% of this large mining licence. So now we're stepping out and drilling other targets. We're seeing some fantastic results. You see to the north of Stockwork Hill there, 8 metres at over, close to 2 grams gold. At cluster 3, 15 metres at over % copper from 100 metres. So we're in that district. We're in the ballpark. There will be more discoveries here. And excitingly, as Graham hinted, we're drilling some deeper holes now. And that's something this project's really lacked. Most of the drilling now only goes down to 500 or 600 metres. But in all those drill holes, it gets stronger, gets better, the mineralisation as we drill deeper. So we're continuing to use our good geology to vector into deeper mineralisation, and really looking for what we call our Hugo Dummett. So most of you are aware, the Torgoy deposit, We have that there on the left-hand side. The open pit has been in production since 2013. It's a 400-metre deep pit now. The Hugo Dummett, I think, is now scheduled to be the world's biggest underground mine. That's in full production now. So if you look at the geology, you look at the same size, very similar relationships. We're ticking the same boxes, but we don't have the deep drilling. And that's what we're focused on now, because what we believe is we're only seeing the tops of the system in that billion-tonne resource. And it's going to be exciting drilling as we continue to search for that deeper core to the system and gets better. So it changes. I'm an exploration geologist, so sometimes it's hard to see people wearing high vis on camp. But that's all changing. The beauty of Mongolia infrastructure, we connected a 30 kVA power line the other week. I think we decided to do it in April, and I think it was connected 2 months later. That's the beauty of operating in a place with good infrastructure. We're producing a new core logging facility, accommodations going in, greenhouses, water filtration. It's all happening, it's busy. It's gone from a sleepy exploration site to 150 people working around the clock, and it's all go. So what we're going to look at here is really the journey. And as I said, we picked up this project 2014, 2015. We bought the project from a subsidiary of Rio Tinto called Turquoise Hill, and we paid $13 million for this project. We got on the ground. We saw about $70 million of exploration that had been previously committed from Ivanhoe Mines. We had that data. We had a fantastic camp, and we set about our job. We knew it would get better. We set about that journey on making it bigger. So we put together a small resource in 2015 on the back of the purchase. 2018, again, that resource continued to grow. But I think the real step change we saw in that, and we saw an independent valuation, about 174. It's about adding value as you go along. The real step change was the resource we put out in 2021, that the 3 million tonnes contained copper, 8 million ounces of gold. That was a real step change for this project. We had some real changes in terms of geology, understanding the ore system, and then it just grew. The grades grew, the system grew, and it was exciting. So, when I look at this chart now and I look at the NPV of the project, we have completed the scoping study at 630. Where we sit at the moment, now we're funded through the PFS with Xanadu Mining. It's about adding the value. And people say, geez, it's been a long task. But I look now globally and I look at some of the projects around the world at the moment. They don't move too fast. And I think Teck 2 years ago put out a study on copper deposits. And taking a copper project from 2014 to where we have in 21, the average is around 15 to 20 years. So everyone said you can't do things in Mongolia. It's a very difficult place to work. It's too cold. Government's not nice, all these things. But we've taken a project from a very small copper project to a very large one in what I believe is a record time. And I said, the infrastructure's in place now. I think you'll see that next phase of development happen in rapid time too. So we might be that sort of horse that's going under the radar a little bit, but we are very focused on our job and we're getting the job done. I will say in the background, we are an exploration company. We have a portfolio of other exploration projects. Some of these projects suffer because you have a bigger project and all your money goes to that. But we have our Red Mountain. Again, this is a district scale project, over 40, 50 square kilometres of porphyry mineralisation, fantastic geochemistry. We've drilled holes here, 200 metres, 1% copper from surface. We've got outcropping epithermal systems. We'll start going back. We're starting to do a little bit more exploration in this project. But this is really the value that Xanadu has in itself. It's a project that's there, and it's a project that we can move on to once we get Hamugtai through to the construction phase. And I think broadly, it's about the opportunities and about the belts. Here we have a map that shows Kazakhstan, it shows Western China and Xinjiang, and it shows Mongolia. And these are the belts we're dealing with. And these belts are some of the world's biggest endowed belts. Here I've got the copper deposits only. There I put the gold deposits on there, and I put projects like Mirantal and Kumtor on there. The 50, 60 million ounce gold deposits that are in Uzbekistan, that are in Kazakhstan. I think the beauty is a lot of these belts all come into Mongolia. And if you look at Kazakhstan there's a lot of those black dots. And these are the big deposits too. And then you look, they all stop at Mongolia. And then they come again when you go through to eastern China. It's not an artefact of geology, it's just an artefact of exploration. So Xanadu is moving a lot of its exploration now to the western parts of Mongolia, where we have the opportunity for nickel sulfides, where the opportunity for more copper. And we believe with the reputation we've built in country, the team we've been able to put together, we have the ability to move quickly and secure some of these great opportunities. And an important part of the world too. A lot of interest, I think, when I look at Kazakhstan now, a lot of Western money going in there. Mongolia, I'm sure that'll happen again. When on the back of Oyu Tolgoi, having a strategic position in Mongolia was almost a necessity for every major mining company. And you'll say what changed? It's probably some of the government policy change, but the geology didn't change. So, these countries take a little bit of time, but, having that advantage, knowing where to go is a critical advantage for us. So as I said, it's all about the development stories. The AEST is, really challenged for copper stories. And you look at the AEST stories here on this map, we've also added some TXX stories, but you're left with Hot Chili, Caravel and Hillside. And we're entering a period where we know copper demand's going to be strong. We know there's a lack of discoveries. So the opportunities in Australia, the groups that have done the hard work, the Xanadus, the Hot Chilis, the Caravels and Rexes, there's very few of them. And I think when you look at those peer comparisons, this is an interesting graph, and this is always evolving. For those who don't know, Filo de Sol's a remarkable discovery in the high Andes between Chile and Argentina. So you could almost take that one out. That's a once in a generational discovery. But you look at the factors here, what we are dealing with Xanadu, very low strip ratio, very below average. EV price, we're cheap. And a lot of the other factors, but the key thing I look at here is the funded through to the PFS. We're one of the few groups here that are actually funded through that. So it's a unique opportunity to be in. And certainly that value is starting to be embedded in our stock, but has a bit to go. So as I said, we're all about discovering world-class ore deposits. We understand the strategy. We don't believe we're a mining company. We believe we're an exploration company that can provide those assets for the future that we all need. We very much de-risk these projects through smart exploration. You need a very good geology team to tell you when to pick up a project, when to stop drilling, and when to continue. And we believe we have that. We have the ability to form deals with larger mining companies. We've done that with Zijin Mining. We live Mongolia, very much our ESG is our everyday. This is a community many of our people come from, so we're very focused on keeping it like that. But we're a growth company too, so not only do we have a large discovery which is going through those study phases and will be one of the next developments globally, but we're continuing to grow that portfolio with smart geology, broadening those asset classes we're looking for in terms of commodities, and looking at some of those commodities that we need for future-facing minerals like nickel, copper, and we're looking at a few of those things in Mongolia. So very much the Xanadu story. So thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Yes, no, it has, following the story for a few years, it has grown, and I guess it's always interesting as you drill in. I think at one stage we were talking about maybe a small copper open cut, gold open cut to get going, but with the funding of Zijin, I think that really changes the story. That, as you saw, that infill drilling has really added something to the open cuts. So look forward into the wide hill. It looks like the pit pushes down, so we look forward to the October resource update. Our next speaker tonight, we've scrapped Gascoyne. They weren't any good. So we've decided we'll get a guy called Simon Lawson from Spartan Resources to join us instead. So what's behind it? Well, it's a new name and it's a new focus for the group. Simon joined the company at the end of last year. It was in trouble as Gascoyne. It had been suspended, and he went about putting it back into the shape it needed to be, recapitalising the company, and if you had the foresight to invest in March at 10 cents, you would have tripled your money this year. But I'm sure there's much more to go. Simon put the open pit at Gilby South on care and maintenance in November last year, because it just didn't have the grade it needed. But the old adage is, if you go to explore, you do so under the head frame. But what do you do at an open cut? Any suggestions? Where do I go? Under the pit, maybe. Drill deeper. Yep. The waste dump. Well, you'd have to move it, so that's not the smartest bit. What about you go and drill underneath the haul road on the way to the open pit? Well, Spartan did, and to tell us the story and how it's going to make a difference, Simon Lawson.
Hello. Good introduction there, thank you. Just clarify, I joined the company late 21. We tried to run the struggling operation for a year. I gave it its dues, and it didn't work. So what I did was shut the plant down in November, made a hard decision. To be fair, probably pissed a few people off at the time because they didn't understand exactly what we were up to. I had communicated pretty well that we had made a major discovery, but we were Gascoyne and no one cared. And that is fair because we had rinsed a bunch of shareholders by putting the company into administration fairly quickly after the company was formed, or around this asset originally, from 2017 to 2019. I come along in 21 when I was acquired by the then mined out of administration reincarnation, or Gascoyne 2, as I like to call it, and then I came into the company to take over as MD. And then basically just adopted the similar strategy that I've always done. I did it with Northern Star. It's just about being aggressive with drill rigs, and that's where we sort of segue to that image there. We have 4 drill rigs on site at the moment. We are drilling through the waste dump right there. There is another drill rig in the background there, and then just beyond that you can actually see the processing plant. So that's exactly how close we are to our infrastructure. It really is kind of incredible every time I look at this image. That we bothered to follow up an 8 metre at 3.9 grams a tonne from 24 metre intercept, and now we're sitting on 721,000 ounces at 5.85, and it's growing. And that's what we're about at the moment. 20,000 metre program just kicked off. I'm starting to see some of the core photos come back to me now, and I'm awaiting assays. So the news flow will start again, and we will continue to grow this. Board and team. There was as was mentioned, there has been a recapitalisation in February. After I shut the plant down, we canvassed a bunch of strategics to see whether someone wanted to come in and actually cornerstone the recapitalisation of this company, to see how much interest there was in this new discovery we had made. At the time, we had about 80,000 ounces, and again, we were Gascoyne, so I don't think people really took too much notice. We then quickly turned that into 303,000 ounces, which was our key update. But again, it was very difficult to attract the attention that I think we deserved. But again, I was working through that legacy of the Gascoyne 2.0 situation. So for me, mining unprofitable dirt is not what I want to be doing. I am a mine geologist. I don't identify as an exploration geologist. I'm certainly not that smart. I just look at the economics, and it wasn't working. So for me, what we had to do was change that grade, and I think we've done that pretty well. The share price has moved up since February to 33. Well, I think it settled back at 31 today. There's a bit of profit taking, as you could possibly imagine. We did have a rights issue along with that recapitalisation at 10 cents, so there's a fair few people taking their sweet time to jump out with a 300% increase on their investment. So I'm happy for them to do that, but I'm in this for the long haul. We brought on Tembo Capital as our cornerstone investor, private equity firm based in Brisbane and London. They've been very supportive. They obviously put $22 million of that 50 into the company, and we've moved very quickly to establish that bigger 700,000 ounce resource. And now we're working towards a potential restart decision in the middle of next year, but there's a few key steps on the way there, and it's about building that resource, getting reserves established, and showing a very profitable mine plan on the way. I started with this plan in February. I've copped a little bit of grief for how quickly we've managed to eclipse a lot of these targets. I'm not going to apologise for that. We will establish a 300,000 ounce reserve pretty swiftly. We have eclipsed the 600,000 high-grade resource ounces that we thought was going to be a bit of a stretch back in February, and we will produce a 5-year mine plan pretty quickly. We have a 2.5 million tonne CIL plant and a gravity circuit that didn't really get a workout with the previous resource, but I'm happy to say, and as we've demonstrated in our announcements, the metallurgical test work suggests that there is a very high gravity component to this new deposit, and it's looking pretty good. We are funded. I'm not coming back to the market. I'm not cum raised. I've got $34 million in the bank, and we're going to continue to drill with those 4 rigs and grow these resources. We've got a focused team. I sat down with quite a few people over the last few days to talk about getting the news, getting the Spartan story out there. Now that I've rebranded the company, I feel like we've earned the right to rebrand the company. Some people rebrand the company and expect everybody to forget the past. I wanted to change the fundamentals and then change the name. So that's what we've done. I sat down with those people and I talked about the 3 key things that make a project work. It's always about the geology, but if you don't have the right team and the money to get it done, it doesn't work. So the geology was actually the key struggle, and I think we've changed that forever. This is where we're situated, midwest of WA. We've got a lot of, I suppose, activity going on around us at the moment. Westgold to the north. We've got Ramelius directly to our east, and then Silver Lake to the south. So there's a fair few strategic people in that area, and they're obviously very interested in what we're doing. But I want to make it pretty clear, we have plan A, which is grow this resource, develop a mine plan, and look at restarting our plant. Mineral resources, I won't go through this. I will point out one particular figure there, 16.7 million tonnes at 2.2 grams a tonne for 1.18 million ounces. You take that, divide 16.7 by 2.5 million tonne, you get about 6.5 years of potential mine life. So we're looking pretty good already. And only 700,000 ounces of that is actually the Never Never deposit. The 400,000 ounces that makes up that balance, roughly, comes from the Gilbey's remnant resource, which we're currently working on and will update in the next few months. And then I've just hired a reserves engineer who's just told me he'll start on the 4th of October, and that's where we'll activate. We'll basically take all these resources that we're growing super rapidly and create this mine plan and come back to the market and show people exactly how we're going to feed this through the plant. Never Never gold deposit, 3.8 million tonnes at 5.85. We're basically drilling over 7 gram material at depth at the moment, so we anticipate that that grade's going to keep going higher. I'm targeting 1 million ounces by the end of this year, but we'll see how we go. And this is why I can say that fairly confidently. When you look at this, this is an ounces per vertical metre and a gradient map. You can see the pink colours are actually increasing with depth, and every MD is going to say that their ore body gets better at depth, right? We can prove it. That's drilling that's making those colours. You can see the ounces per vertical metre increasing from the previous resource, which was the 300,000 ounce resource at the end of last year, in the grey bars, increasing to the orange bars, and then as we're heading further down and getting better density in drilling, we imagine that that will get better. So 1,690 ounces per vertical metre is pretty healthy. Over 1,000 ounces per vertical metre is a pretty good benchmark for us, and we're smashing that. So happy days. Some of the highlight intercepts. There's not a lot of new stuff in this presentation from what I presented last week, but we're about to come out with a bunch of new intercepts. As I said, I'm starting to see some good core coming back, and I'm waiting for the assays. But these are some pretty amazing drill hits. You don't really see a lot of hits like this, let alone see groups of them in the one deposit. We knew we were onto something pretty special just after I presented at the Resources Rising Stars conference in June last year, when we hit 54 metres at 6.5, and that included an interval of 13 metres at 51 grams. And then we consistently kept hitting this ore body. We've worked out now that the geometry is roughly 30 metres in width on average. It's about 100 metre strike length, and it does blend into the Gilbey's sequence, so there is a bit of a V shape. I'll be coming out with a sort of a 3D model to show people how the geometry of this deposit works, because I think it's really key for people to understand. It's a pretty special ore body. You can tell from the grades. We've drilled over 400 holes into this now, so I'm pretty confident we're onto something pretty good. I did try to throw a bit of humour in there. Instead of putting the Eiffel Tower in, I put an A380 in a while back. Most people have seen those aircraft. They're quite large. Our ore body dwarfs that aircraft. So that's just to give people an understanding of how big this thing is. And while we're drilling, and as Andrew just mentioned, while you're drilling to hit one target, a lot of the time you'll discover another one. So Inc is actually a parallel load system that sits up dip in the hanging wall, and we'll be focusing on that. And I suppose because we're drilling at Never Never at depth, we're going to be going through that Inc prospect as well. And as was mentioned, there is a waste dump in the way, but luckily we do have an open pit optimised shape that actually just shaves that waste dump. And to be honest, the grades of that open pit are going to support destacking that waste dump, which is only 20 metres high now anyway. So it's not a biggie for us, and I'll work out those economics and bring them back to market. But when you're looking at a 2.2 gram open pit that's less than 600 metres from a plant with 90,000 ounces in it, it's pretty much a no-brainer. The real upside to this, having changed, I suppose, the future of this company and this asset, is that there's not just one of these structures. And this is the story that I'm going to sort of bring to people, and the journey I'm going to take people on with our drill rigs right now. We are drilling these additional targets. Never Never's on the left-hand side. This is a long section. The Gilbey's open pit, previously uneconomic, and I would say mined independently, it would still be uneconomic. However, there are a number of high-grade structures that actually create that low-grade ore body that was mined through that pit, and we are targeting these parallel structures now. So Never Never is just one structure that intersects the stratigraphy, and you end up with a big accumulation of high-grade gold there, and then you get a number of these other structures that you can see in that block model there. So just to point out, that block model is actually being diluted deliberately because it was done by the previous management to try and reduce the overcall and basically, put a bit of conservatism into the mining so that they didn't overcall and end up with under-reconciliation, which is what sent the company broke the first time. So for me, we look back into the raw data, and this is the new imagery we'll be coming out with in the next week that will show people exactly why we think these structures are real. The raw data tells us there's existing drill holes there, there's grade control information that tells us it's there. The mine geologists that were working in that pit that are now logging the drill core for Never Never are telling me that they've seen exactly the same mineralisation in those areas within the pit. And in March last year, we hit a record quarter, which allowed us to pay off a $20 million con note out of cash flow because we mined one of these structures. And when you put all those observations together, it's pretty clear that there's some pretty special dirt in that pit. What are we doing right now? I needed to update this. We've actually got 4 drill rigs on site. They've been arriving flat out, 20,000 metre surface drill program, and it's just about growth. I mean, the M&A in the region, people ask me every day what's going on with M&A. I'm not really fussed. What we're doing is creating a new company under a new banner, which is Spartan, and we're going to take this forward and grow it as big as we possibly can, as quickly as we can. We're going to drill Never Never, we're going to drill that Inc prospect, we're going to drill the 2 new high-grade areas beneath and trending west of Gilbey's. We're going to drill Arc, which looks like an interesting higher-grade prospect just to the north of Never Never. So we're seriously not resting on this one discovery. We're going to try and blow this whole area up. And we're going to drill test our SAM targets. So we did a sub-audio magnetic survey, and we're going to be putting all that together and out to the market fairly shortly. It's taken a long time to get some processing done on that, but we finally will be able to put that out shortly. And that identifies a number of these structural intersections, which we are hopeful will give us that high-grade potential. But as I said, I'm not an exploration guy. I'm actually focused on what we know, and the facts are there is high grade that we can drill right now, and that's what we're focused primarily on. We've got 10 projects underway to make sure that we answer all the questions before they're asked. Does the metallurgy work? Does the geotechnical work? Does the mill work? Can we optimise the throughput? What can we do coming up to a restart decision to make this better, get better recovery, and get the maximum profit from this? We're building out the team. As I said, we've got a reserve engineer starting on the 4th of October, and his primary role, his only role, is to get a reserve, mine plan, mine design and mine schedule happening. We made a decision just recently. We budgeted for about $8 million to go and put in an underground drill drive, which would give us the ability to drill out high density drill spacing across the Never Never deposit. Turns out we did better than what we thought from the surface. We got a better resource than what we thought. We indicated 76% of those ounces. So we kind of found a reason to not have to do the drill drive. Plus we found out through industry costs that development meters now are very expensive. So it was a pretty easy decision to make to put more money into drilling more Never Nevers. Why invest in Spartan? It's pretty simple. It's all about facts. I'm not talking about potential. I'm talking about a resource that is growing on a daily basis. We've got high grade. We've got a 2.2 gram open pit in front of that plant. It's very easy to turn that plant back on. We're maintaining it on a high state of readiness. We rotate the mill twice a week. The greasing system still works. We've taken all the liners out. We've really looked after that plant because we know we can turn it back on pretty quickly. We've got proven scale, 16.7 million tonnes divided by 2.5 equals, like I say, 6.5 years potentially, and we'll make that 10. That's my personal goal. Proven growth took us less than 12 months to get to 720,000 ounces, and we did it for less than $14 an ounce discovered. So we've been very efficient with our drill meters and our spend, and we're a proven team. I've got a bit of stuff up with the text there, but we are a proven team of discoverers. This is what I've done. This is probably the 4th time I've done this across a different broken asset and brought it back to the market. I did it for Northern Star for many years. I did it for Silver Lake when they first started, and now I'm doing it for Spartan. We're assessing our infrastructure in terms of whether we can slow that mill down and improve recoveries, bring up that head grade and not have to process so many rocks. But for the moment, we're going to stick with the 2.5 million tonne per annum run rate, and we'll make that work, and anything else is upside. Our market cap, 289 million. It's actually 34 million in cash, although my CFO's updated that, so there we go, 30 million in cash. We're spending it faster with our drill rigs. And we've got active news flow. I mean, one of the things that people talk about as explorers, that talk about potential and don't keep people updated with what's happening. One of the things I'm very hot on is just to make sure that we're transparent. I mean, from a Gascoyne perspective, I think there's a lot of legacy there, and with the Spartan rebrand, I want to make sure that people understand exactly what we're doing. So we will be delivering lots of news flow. 4 rigs creates a lot of news flow. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I thought you'd never finish. The next speaker is Mark Bennett, who is obviously well known to a number of people, and I can't believe, actually looking at what he's done, that he's still alive, because he's been through and found so many deposits. And explored so many places. Started as a young bloke of 5 years old at Kambalda. Also worked at St Ives, and then WMC said, you need a holiday in West Africa. So he actually learnt to say Ouagadougou before most of us knew where Burkina Faso was. And now obviously Perseus is doing very well in Côte d'Ivoire. And Resolutes in Mali, and we've got a couple of production companies in Burkina Faso. But he moved on to Lion Ore, made a number of discoveries: Waterloo, Thunderbox. If you need an explanation of what Thunderbox is, all you got to do is go on to Mark Bennett's LinkedIn page, scroll back a couple of weeks of postings, and it's there to see. On to Sirius Resources, Nova Bollinger obviously been a key pin of IGO over the last few years, but it was the eye structure that interested Mark. Still quite, I obviously don't look at it the right way, and just my monocular vision, I can't see it, but anyway, it worked. And it was the big breakthrough after many years of exploring and prospecting for Mark Creasy, who obviously has gone on to do bigger and better things, and has obviously had a hit with Tony Rivera in lithium recently. Sirius got taken over by IGO. S2 Resources was spun out of that and took their non-Nova Bollinger assets. Todd River has since been spun out of S2 Resources. Because he likes spin-outs, he's also helped out Tim Goyder and the boys at Chalice Mining, and chairs a spin-out of Chalice, Falcon Metals, who was also in Victoria with a typical Chalice Mining opening play. But that's for another day. But the important thing about S2 Resources, and we sort of fed you a little bit of a line in saying it was about Finland. It's just not actually about Finland anymore, because Sirius started with WA tenements, went to the Nordics, found a bit in Finland, but really it's come back to Australia. It's due to Dictator Dan that Mark couldn't go to Melbourne, but he could go elsewhere in Victoria. So he found there was a place up at Fosterville. I think it produced and made a few 100,000 ounces a year, and there was a photo of Mark standing near the admin block. But he was. I saw the photo, saw the dotted lines, and I thought, oh, here we are. We've got another Ernest Henry on our hands. He's about to explore on someone else's ground, but no, he's got exploration ground right next to the Fosterville admin building, which has been a fabulous deposit since it's been found. But wait, there's more. There's Coonaberry in New South Wales for nickel, and there's also down the track Jillawarra in WA. So to explain in detail how all that works, Mark Bennett.
I think I've got about 5 minutes left for the talk now. Thanks, people, for coming. So the first talk was really about, having found stuff and got to feasibility stage. The second one was about finding stuff, and this one is about promising to find stuff. I guess S2 and its precursor Sirius and the same team through Lion Ore and a few other companies have been together for 20, 30 years now. And exploration is what we do, and that's a little quote by T.S. Eliot, which pretty well sums it up, really. When everyone thinks everything's been found, you go back to square one and you open your eyes and find something different. That's just the usual cautionary statement. What S2 does is hunt for hidden elephants. And we're fortunate in that because of our track record, we've got a bunch of shareholders who allow us to do that. They give us the time and show us the patience to do what you need to do to put in the legwork, which takes many years to find an overnight success. So this is what we do. Essentially, this is what we do. We look for big things to create value. If they're good, we develop them, a bit like Nova with Sirius. If they're not, then we're not afraid to walk, and we like to preferably monetise those to fund our exploration for the ongoing search for the big one, or maybe sometimes keep a slice of a pie at no or low cost to be exposed to the upside that somebody else is paying for. So that stops us getting cornered, it stops us falling in love with things and persisting with things that we just need to move on and avoid falling into the trap of it being an opportunity cost. It also means, it lessens the need for new equity, so it minimises dilution to existing shareholders. And that's why they give us the long leash to do what we do. And you'll see later on who some of those big guys are. But basically they say, as long as you manage your money well and you're surviving and you're swinging the bat and having shots and not diluting us to buggery, then we'll keep on supporting you, which is a great place to be. So these are the things we've various team members have found in the past. A gold mine in Burkina Faso, the Thunderbox gold mine that was ended up is with Northern Star. Waterloo nickel mine, Lounge Lizard nickel mine south of Flying Fox. The Nova Bollinger nickel copper mine, a small one, Baloo, near Norseman. And the most recent thing is a sort of emerging gold prospect next door to the Kittilä gold mine in Finland, owned by Agnico Eagle, which is Europe's biggest. Their mine is Europe's biggest gold mine, and we've got an interesting looking prospect right next door to it. If they don't make the grade, then we off them, and these are things we've offed. So we sold Baloo to Westgold for 9 mil. We've carved off some finished ground in a joint venture with Kinross, who are spending best part of 10 mil US on that to earn 70%. Similarly with Rupert Resources, a TSXV listed junior, they're earning into another little slice of that pie for 3.5 mil euro. We've sold some small little tenements to another Canadian junior, some applications to Kinross. We've recently vended in a couple of our WA exploration plays into an unlisted company called Pacific State Metals, which aims to list in the middle of next year, and we've got about 30% of that. And there's a few other things we're looking at doing as well, and it's really to stop ourselves being too widely spread and focus on 3 things we think are the big ones in the making. Just briefly, corporately, there's a 5-year and a 6-month share price chart there. We sort of, first of all, I guess our shareholders, you'll see Mark Creasy has 16%, Jupiter Asset Management from London, nearly 15, Paradise from Sydney, 7 and a bit, and a few other instos in there. So between those guys and the insiders, we've got about half of the company sewn up. Really, those guys are very patient. They made a lot of money from Sirius. They're not in it for doubling or tripling their money. They're in it for 5, 10, 20 baggers. So again, it gives us a great opportunity to do stuff that a lot of juniors can't when they're constantly managing their own shareholders. Got a bit of cash, 6 mil, a couple of investments worth a couple between them. And that share price chart really shows that we sort of got a base level, and then when there's an event, there's a bit of betting on the outcome of it. The first event there is gold drilling in Finland. The second is when we drilled a couple of conductors in Fraser Range. The third sort of leg up there is when we were awarded the Fosterville tenement, which was highly sought after, and I'll spend most of the time talking about. And the fourth one most recently is doing the first ever deal with the traditional owners in the Fosterville area, which will enable the Victorian government to eventually grant our exploration licence, I think. So three sort of stories. I've sort of uncorporatised them, if you like, because it's getting on a bit. So once upon a time in Western Australia, and it's a then and now thing, if you like. The team, when we were with Lion Ore, we discovered Thunderbox, and that is the photo that Graham referred to, and I think Kerry used in her gold conference intro the other week. That is the Thunderbox there, with Will Dix sitting on it, looking at his magnetic interpretation. So we found that. A couple of companies looked at that. Normandy Mining called it a 2-gram graveyard because they didn't appreciate that it was 80 metres thick from pretty well close to surface with a nice supergene-enriched zone on top. And thanks to that, it had a 9-month payback, even when gold was $375 an ounce. So that was found by looking in an improbable place just a kilometre from the Goldfields Highway with no geochem response, no geophysical response. And we put in a couple of air core lines across it, two lines, 40 holes. The last 2 holes on the line didn't get drilled because there was a creek in flood. So drilling 38 out of 40 holes, you'd think, okay, that's job done, forget about the rest, but we didn't. And the last sample in the last hole was the discovery hole for Thunderbox. It's a big deposit, not as big now because it's been mined for quite a while. But it was undercover with very little signature. So how that relates to now is we've identified a similar zone north of Simon's Ground, actually, north of Big Bell. It's a 30-kilometre long shear zone that's undercover, not being explored, a long strike from Big Bell. It's under application at the moment. It's been sitting there for 18 months waiting for heritage agreements to get sorted, and that's a recurring theme with all of our things. We've been fairly quiet for a couple of years because of sorting all of these agreements out, and we don't really say much when there's not much to say, so this is my first outing in that time, really. But when that heritage agreement is sorted and the ground gets granted, we'll be straight onto it doing a big air core program like we did back at Thunderbox, and that's just in a simplistic sense the similarities. That's looking at a regional scale at aeromagnetic images. The one on the right shows Thunderbox at the south end of a north-northeast trending bend in the shear zone, bronze wings up the top, and then sort of parallel to that over to the west is the same sort of thing with the Agnew Lawlers gold mines and Bellevue sitting in it. And on the left-hand side is the Meekatharra district with all the sort of Meeka line mines on the right-hand side. Big Bell down to the south and the same structure ripping through our ground. It doesn't look particularly sort of big at that scale, but that little yellow oval is about 35 k's strike length on our ground that's just waiting to be drilled when we can get on it. So that was once upon a time in WA. This is once upon a time in WA and New South Wales. So the same team as Sirius found Nova. We took it from a $7 million company to $1.8 billion. Part of that deal being taken over by IGO was to spawn S2. And fast forward probably 10 years and we found a big bit of unloved ground in New South Wales. About 2 hours drive north of Broken Hill, straddling the Silver City Highway, either side of the Pack Saddle pub. And that's the ground that had been looked at by Inco Vale a few years back. They'd done some regional airborne mags and EM, and in the big company fashion had walked pretty well straight away after that without doing a lot of work on the ground. And that's exactly what had happened in the Forestania belt prior to us finding Nova as well. Inco Vale had been there before us and done exactly the same thing, so we consider that a good thing. And we got the benefit of all their data as well. The ground was open. There are a couple of reports from those days of nickel copper sulfides in outcrop and in drill core of the few holes that they did drill. So we've got an area that looks a dead ringer for the area that contained Nova. And this slide here, the diagram on the right-hand side, is sort of the central southern chunk of the Australian continent, if you like. So the South Australian, West Australian border goes pretty well down the middle there. The Fraser zone, which Nova was found in, is a sort of mobile zone that wraps around the Yilgarn Craton. And the Coonanberry belt is exactly the same, and it wraps around the Curnamona Craton at Broken Hill. They're almost like a mirror image of one another. They're not exactly the same age, but that doesn't really matter. But where they are really similar is, if you look in those two pickies down on the bottom left there, the thing that marks out the nickel fertile part of the Fraser Range is the big linear gravity anomaly, which represents a big chunk of dense crust that was thrust up and brought those deposits to the surface. And you get a similar thing at Coonanberry as well, which is the right-hand side of the two smaller images there. So you've got a big dense chunk of crust thrust up against the margin of the Curnamona Craton. That's that gravity anomaly in detail on the right-hand side. And then if you look at the magnetics on the left, you've got a lot of long, skinny, stringy features, and they're all sills, intrusive sills, which is where you find these things. So we've got exactly the same ingredients at a broad scale as we had in the Fraser Range. And the ground was open, so we pegged it, and we got 140 kilometre strike length of a blank canvas, really, to start on. So that's those tenements, by the way, at Coonamberry were granted a couple of weeks back, so we're actually going to start doing something there at last. So there will be news flow starting from there. And then once upon a time in Victoria, a number of you will be aware there was a tired old gold mine called Fosterville that nobody wanted until they found a bonanza zone which was roughly 2.5 million ounces at 50 grams. And it became the flavour of the month. Every man and his dog wanted it. Kirkland Lake from Canada bought the mine, and they spent a lot of money around the mine trying to convince the government to let them hold on to that extra ground for longer than it would normally be able to. So they spent probably $20 to $30 million acquiring all sorts of stuff. And then the Victorian government said, well, thanks, guys, sorry, but your tenement's expired. They put it into a moratorium. They divided it up into 4 blocks. And Kirkland Lake put in a proposal to get that back. And in their relinquishment report, they say virtually word for word that, you know, we will definitely be getting this back, and we'll be continuing to follow up the drill hits we've had in this work. But then when the tender happened, every man and his dog put in bids for it. There were 4 blocks. Block 4 was the gem around the mine. We put in bids for 3 of them. Didn't think we'd even have a chance. We know that other companies, including the big boys, were putting in bids of up to $65 million for Block 4, which is the key one, and we won it with a $10 million bid. And in parallel with this, Kirkland was being taken over by Agnico Eagle of Canada, a $30 billion company. So by the time that deal completed, they'd got the mine, but they'd lost all the ground around it, and we had it. Now, that's been in process of getting granted for a long time now, and we're very hopeful that it's very imminent. So once we do get on the ground, we'll hit the ground running for a bunch of reasons I'll show you. And that's also the photo that Graham referred to there. That's me standing on the tenement boundary, and that's Agnico Eagle's gold mine that's been producing 600,000 ounces a year at about $500 an ounce cost. I sort of stood there for a while until the security came out and told me to bugger off. And I very politely told them that they're actually standing on our ground now. So the background to this is it's east of Bendigo. Those 4 blocks on the left-hand diagram you see were the 4 blocks in the tender process. The blow-up of that diagram on the right-hand side shows Block 4, which we ended up getting, and the red rectangle in the middle is Agnico's mine lease. So we absolutely surround them, and they're, you know, as they continue to mine, they get closer to the border, and even by doing nothing, we feel the value is going up. Importantly, we inherited all that data. We inherited probably $30 million worth of geochemistry, gravity, magnetics, electromagnetics, induced polarisation, seismics, their drilling database, and the actual core. So they'd gone hell for leather drilling this stuff, maybe in the hope that they might find something and get a retention licence, which would allow them to keep the ground, but they just didn't get there in time. So we've inherited, 20 or 30 prospects that they'd defined. Some of them aren't only drill ready, some of them already have drill holes in them, and I'll show you some of the hits in a minute. So we can just basically walk up to them and start where they left off. And there are other things like this IP data here. They ran IP over their known deposits to see if it was a good vector for finding the mineralisation, and you can see on those 2 lines down the bottom there, it works. It lights up things over the Harrier Zone, the Swan Zone, and so on, and up at Robbins Hill as well. And there are a few other areas where it's lighting things up, which are now on our ground. But the coverage isn't that great on our ground, so we'll extend this thing as another means of sort of focusing in on prospects outside of the ones that are already drill ready. And there are prospects like this. This is a sort of view looking from above to the southwest. So you're looking at the surface. The pink area there is Agnico's mining lease and their deposits within it. Everything outside of that pink area is ours. And for example, up at Gornong, where we've got that arrow plunging down, we've got hits like 20 metres at 6 grams to follow up, drilled courtesy of Kirkland Lake. And a kilometre down plunge from that is where the next hole is, and that's 3 metres at just under 8 grams there. So it's really a no-brainer from an exploration point of view. So our aim here is to go in there, get drilling instantly, and start hopefully chasing these trends and extending them, whilst we're in parallel with that sort of doing more of the broad brush stuff. So that's our plan A. It's overlain... Sorry, I'll just go back. I'll just skip over that. That's just the geology. We've got sort of well-known geological models to go on courtesy of the mine as well. Yeah, no, it's disappeared from here. But what I'm going to say is the interesting thing about this is we're at Fosterville to find some serious high-grade gold. But we're right next door to a $30 billion company. Our market cap is 0.6% of theirs. We're cramping their style seriously. We're also next door neighbours to them in Finland. So we're probably pretty annoying. When the tender process played out, we won the key block for $10 million. They put in bids for the 3 other blocks for $30 million each, and they won those. So they've ended up with the 3 consolation prizes, and once they become exploration licences, that bid becomes a liability, an expenditure liability. So they're stuck with, if they get those granted, having to spend $90 million on what they don't want, which is 50% more than our entire market cap. So that could make an interesting situation in its own right, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that rundown. Now what we'll do, we'll run to question time. If I ask the gents to come up and take a seat, and we'll fire some questions. We'll have a roving mic as well. So don't be shy. Come and have a seat. Yeah, so we'll have a mic. So if you put your hand up, the first question will be. Will be Keith Good, undoubtedly. Where are you, Keith? He's gone. Oh, there you go. Oh, yeah. Well, that'll cut 3 questions out. Does anyone have one? Does anyone have a question? Come on, Chilts, can you help me out here? Kerry, thanks.
Thanks to all of you for great presentations, really interesting. Question for you, Andrew, on your flagship project. The picture itself, I know you said you've got power coming into the area. It did look quite remote, and I was just wondering about infrastructure further down the track.
Thank you, Kerry. I used to drive to this project in 2002. It was about 16, 17 hours of driving. Now it's 4 hours on a paved road. You got power. At the moment, we're drilling out a water resource. What happens is when you have projects like Oyu Tolgoi, and what we didn't talk about, only 50 kilometres to the south of us is a project called Tavan Tolgoi. Currently, Tavan Tolgoi is mining, exporting 30 million tonnes of coking coal to China in one single project. That's almost the same amount of coal as the Bowen Basin. It's one open pit. So when you work in areas where there's big deposits, the infrastructure comes. So we don't have to worry about it, but those big projects that surround us, it all comes in place. So as I said to you, we connected that power line. all we had to do was connect 7 kilometres and we're into power, into the grid.
Is the government going to be helping as well?
Well, it's already helped. It's done it. You know, so the beauty of Mongolia, your biggest market is China. Oyu takes its concentrate and trucks it into smelters that are only less than 100 kilometres over the border. So there are multiple smelters within 200 kilometres of the project. Yeah.
Thank you. And we got another question? I'll just throw one in for Simon. You obviously were a key acquisition in the takeover of Yalgoo, and there was a sort of a roundabout 110 kilometre road there. Where does Yalgoo fit into drilling out Never Never? And I guess supplementary to that, you talked about high grade structures at depth below the Gilby pit. Is there a re-optimisation of the cut-off grade there? Do you do the same thing at Yalgoo? Can you give us a bit of feel how you put that all together?
Yep, it's a good question. I've been asked that a fair bit, obviously, to try and justify my existence at the company, having been acquired for $51 million in that merger. Unfortunately, and I won't apologise for this either, something that's 110 kilometres away looks far less likely to be mined in the short term than what's 600 metres away from that plant. And I'm focused primarily on the 2 square kilometres of granted mining lease that sits right in front of that plant. And I think that we're sort of proving why that focus is important. There's some serious economics that we can demonstrate, and we obviously bring those numbers out. As for what's under the pit, sorry, do you want to just repeat that?
Yes. You talked about high grade structures that you've seen 2 or 3 of in the Gilby's pit, and they look like they push deeper. How do you sort of optimise potential underground versus a higher grade, a higher cut-off grade of Gilby's? How do you sort of play that off in your mind?
I get a mining engineer.
Okay. Ask after October.
Of course. So, I mean, for me, it's about recognising your skill set. My skill set is about identifying opportunity. And I had one of the Northern Star colleagues that I worked with for many years, who's an exceptionally talented engineer, approach me to say that he wanted to be a Spartan. And I took that as a bit of a compliment, because I really enjoyed rebranding this company. I really like where we're going with it. And for him to say that and have such talent and not go to somebody like Bill Beeman at Develop, where I'm sure he'd be loved, for him to come and become a Spartan and actually build that reserve plan for us it's the next step in the evolution of what we're doing.
Thank you. Mark's sitting here going to sleep. Can someone wake him up with a question?
He's still alive.
How did you beat all the others, Mark?
Well, that was the first question we asked ourselves. Gold Road, Newmont, Kirkland Lake, they were all in there. So that amount of money isn't a cash payment, it's a work program. So we said we'll spend $10 million over the 5-year initial life of the EL. And the others said they'll spend 50, 60, 70, whatever it is. So we couldn't compete on that. It was only until fairly recently when we sort of discovered how we did it. And it was because of our relationship with the Aboriginals, basically. So when they did the tender, 55% of the weighting was based on what you propose to do, what your track record is, and how you propose to fund it, and 45% was ESG. And 25% alone was traditional owners. And coming from WA, where we deal with traditional owners all the time, it was just normal to us. And I think in Victoria, it was a bit of a foreign concept. So I think it went a bit like the Eurovision Song Contest does when one country gives all its votes to the other. And I think that's what got us over the line. So you can actually put a tangible dollar value on ESG in that instance.
Okay, thank you. Over here.
Are you seeing any new technologies in the exploration field which will reduce the cycle from start to finish, like radical reductions in it?
Can you take that, Mark?
I think there's tweaks to technologies, but nothing sort of truly radical. I think the thing that, I'm probably old-fashioned, but the thing that I think matters as much as anything is people and thinking and boots on ground. And there's less and less of that. As technology advances, it becomes a crutch rather than an adjunct to what the geos do. So I think good old-fashioned geological work is more important than ever because there's fewer people doing it. You can get some good technologies to help you, big computing and number crunching to see things in data that you might not otherwise see, techniques that might see a bit deeper, but they're just incremental advances, I think, rather than a silver bullet.
Yep. Anything to add? Andy?
Yeah, it's sad. There's no geologists coming through the universities. The biggest problem, the best technology is a hand lens and a pair of boots and a hammer. And getting graduates and getting things now is very, very difficult. So, the lack of people coming through is a problem. And as Mark said, you can get all that data. At the end of the day, you need someone to interpret it and tell you where to drill and tell you when to stop drilling and when to move on. So it's all people, and we've got a real, it's not just Australia, I see, we're in Mongolia, you look at the graduates coming through Mongolia, it used to be 60, 70, now it's 1 or 2. So you look at the places where we are now, it's a lack of geologists, engineers, geophysicists. It's a big problem for our industry. Yeah.
Jared?
Question for Mark. The government of Victoria, there seems to be a lot of limitations to the current mines there from there to be compliant with the new environmental permitting. It seems to be, I think I've heard that Fosterville's running out of space, not Fosterville, Costerfield, a lot of them, and there's no new permits for processing open pit. How will you face that?
Well, I think where we are, irrespective of if we find something ourselves, when we do, you're not going to build another plant right next to an existing one. So you'll end up using that plant because it's there. It's cheaper, and you probably won't get a new permit to build another one. So it comes down to how that happens. Whether it's toll treating, profit-sharing mining operation, or one monster gobbling up a little minnow.
Have I got any other questions? Up the back?
Yeah, Andrew, thank you so much. I just want to know the challenges you have in Mongolia, if there's any disadvantages. You said also, multiple questions, you also said about your drilling platform, there's some deep and shallow. Can you tell me the depth and what you found, but more so the challenges of Mongolia, please?
I think in exploration, the challenges are very similar wherever you go in the world. It's the people. Whether you're dealing with farmers or wherever you're dealing with people that live in that district. So it's making sure that people see incredible value created rapidly, but often they don't see that come into their local communities. They're devoid of it, so it's about, the biggest challenges is managing all those things that go around ESG. It's your community, it's the environment and those things. But everywhere is very similar. It's interesting, the issues may be slightly more weighted in one way than the other way, but all those issues are, there, no matter what you do. So, but in saying that, that's your business. and that's to operate and to build a mine. You need to lay that platform from day one. When you do the exploration, you meet people. So if you're not doing it properly, then it's not a good, sustainable business. And I think people in the industry that have worked here a long time understand how important it is. So it's about finding the right groups that know how to do that. Are they pro or against? They could be both. Yeah, like it's mixed. You go to some communities, people want it. It's like anything in Australia. Like someone's going to build something in your suburb. There's people for it, people against it. But often the people against things have the loudest voice. People for things don't say anything. They're passive. So it's about managing the people that are always against things. So, yeah, and people are silent till it gets serious too. So if you're not managing it along the way, you get a rude surprise when you really want to permit something. And you need to avoid that. But that's risk mitigation. That's having the right team on the ground, community team managing that risk. Yeah, drilling's talk about technology. It'd be nice to see something change in drilling. Like we're still doing the same thing we did in the 70s.
What you found more in the deep or the shallow?
Yeah, like for our system, very focused on the open pit resource, but it's getting better at depth. It's not a surprise. It's just they're drilling. Yeah.
What's the mining cost per metre up there?
Drilling cost? Well, I can't tell you because it make people cry, but I think our latest numbers, all in sustaining cost camp assays, everything about $170 a metre, diamond.
Just another question for Mark. When I look at the Fraser Albany range, and we've obviously been following independence there that sort of started out with a lot of the northern stuff, but they've found one gold mine really, a few deposits in that gold mine, but and there's been a very good nickel mine that you had something to do with in the south. And bits and pieces, but a very large area compared with what's been found over the years in Canada. You've got, it looks like, an IGO, Independence Group size group of tenements at Coonamberry. How do you prioritise that so you don't go broke trying to find the big one?
Yeah, good point. I guess we're at a point now, we don't yet know whether it's something we're capable of doing all ourselves or not. We don't like giving chunks away to others. That was why Sirius went so well, because no one else was in there.
Yeah.
So we're just looking at that right now. I mean, we'll start off doing relatively cheap broad brush stuff, ground electromagnetic geophysics, which will, give us a few vectors early on. We've got some things to get a jump start on with, I guess, and that's the stuff that Vale and Inco flew. So we got some areas we can start, and we'll just do it piecemeal from there. And that's exactly what we did with the Fraser Range for the sort of 3 or 4 years before we found Nova. The difference is, I think you've got a better chance of the geophysics working in Coonamberry, because the deep weathering in the Fraser Range sort of hides things. And like with Nova, for example, once we'd found it, we flew every airborne EM system known to man over it, and none of them saw a thing. So, anyone who relies on airborne EM could be spending a lot of money in the wrong places.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, that basically brings us to the close for tonight. Thank you all for coming. We do have a traditional gift, which, given that we've got a Victorian-based company here, is most important. That we've got 3 Eureka Stockade flags. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks a lot, Graham.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Simon. And I'm told I have to remind people that this represents the freedom that mining has brought to the country. If you go back through the history of Australia as a democracy, you'll actually see that we got to full democracy in Australia, both for the men's franchise and the women's franchise earlier, and a lot of that comes back to the events at Eureka Stockade, the inability for companies, for juries to convict anyone at that function, and is symbolised in that flag. Thank you very much for coming, and we look forward to you coming to the next lunch.